When people hear the words "in the shadow of war," something shifts inside them. It is not just a political phrase. It is not just a headline. It is a feeling. It is the tightness in a parent's chest when they watch the news late at night. It is the silence at the dinner table when uncertainty hangs heavier than conversation. It is the quiet question that echoes in the minds of millions. What kind of future are we walking into? War casts a long shadow. It stretches across borders, across generations, across economies and dreams. It makes people question stability. It makes leaders calculate risk. It makes families pray harder. But here is the truth most people overlook. Long before armies move, long before alliances are tested, long before history books are written, something far more powerful is already shaping global destiny. That force is personal discipline. Not military discipline, not government discipline, personal discipline. The kind that lives inside individuals. The kind that determines how we think, how we respond, how we lead, how we influence others, and how we build our communities. Global destiny does not suddenly appear out of nowhere. It is the accumulated result of millions of daily decisions made by ordinary people. The shadow of war may seem vast and uncontrollable, but the character of individuals is what ultimately determines whether that shadow deepens or begins to lift. In times of peace, discipline can feel optional. You can delay improvement. You can postpone growth. You can ignore your habits and still feel relatively secure. But when the world feels uncertain, when tensions rise between nations, when fear begins to spread through headlines and conversations, discipline stops being optional. It becomes essential, because in uncertain times, emotions rise quickly. Fear spreads fast. Anger finds easy targets. Rumors travel faster than facts. And without discipline, people react instead of respond. They panic instead of plan. They divide instead of unite. Personal discipline is what steadies the human spirit when the external environment becomes unstable. It is the ability to control your thoughts when chaos tries to control you. It is the strength to remain calm when others are overwhelmed. It is the commitment to long-term wisdom instead of short-term emotional reactions. And this is where the real shaping of global destiny begins. Not in war rooms, but in living rooms. Not only in diplomatic meetings, but in personal habits. Because disciplined individuals create stable families. Stable families build strong communities. Strong communities influence nations. And nations, in turn, determine the course of history. When tension grows between powerful countries and the possibility of larger conflict feels real, people often feel powerless. They say, "What can I possibly do? I am not a president. I am not a general. I do not control foreign policy." But that thinking overlooks a deeper principle. Every society reflects the mindset of its people. Leaders rise from cultures. Decisions are influenced by public opinion. Economies are powered by workers, entrepreneurs, and consumers. Conversations shape narratives, and narratives shape action. If individuals lack discipline, societies become reactive. If individuals cultivate discipline, societies become thoughtful and strategic. The shadow of war is darkened by impulsive decisions, by pride unchecked, by fear amplified. It is softened by patience, by clarity, by responsibility. Those qualities are not born in government buildings. They are born in personal practice. Personal discipline begins with the mind. When the world feels unstable, your greatest battlefield is internal. It is the battle between fear and faith, between anger and understanding, between reaction and reflection. The disciplined person does not deny fear. They acknowledge it. They feel it, but they do not allow it to dictate their actions. They pause. They evaluate. They ask better questions. What is true? What is rumor? What is within my control? What can I influence? That pause may seem small, but multiplied by millions of people, it changes the tone of a nation. A society that reacts instantly becomes volatile. A society that thinks before acting becomes resilient. And resilience is what determines whether tension escalates or de-escalates. Discipline also shapes how we communicate. In times of global strain, words matter more than ever. Conversations can inflame or calm. Social media posts can divide or unite. The disciplined individual chooses language carefully. They resist the temptation to spread unverified information. They refuse to dehumanize others based on nationality, religion, or politics. They understand that conflict between governments does not justify hatred between people. This is not weakness. It is strength under control. It is emotional maturity, and emotional maturity at scale has enormous influence. When people discipline their speech, they reduce unnecessary hostility. When hostility decreases, space for dialogue increases, and dialogue is always the first step away from destruction. Another dimension of discipline is preparation. In uncertain times, disciplined individuals prepare rather than panic. They strengthen their finances. They invest in skills. They improve their health. They build supportive relationships. They create contingency plans. This is not living in fear. It is living responsibly. Preparation creates confidence. Confidence reduces anxiety, and a confident population is less likely to be manipulated by fear-based messaging. When citizens are stable and prepared, they demand thoughtful leadership rather than emotional rhetoric. That expectation influences national decisions. Again, global destiny is shaped not only by leaders, but by the standard of character the public maintains. Health discipline is especially critical in times of tension. Stress spreads quickly during geopolitical crises. People lose sleep. They consume constant news. They neglect exercise. They eat poorly. Over time, that erodes mental clarity. A tired, stressed population becomes reactive, but a disciplined individual protects their energy. They limit excessive exposure to alarming information. They maintain routines. They prioritize rest. They exercise to release tension. They nourish their bodies. This physical stability supports emotional stability. Emotional stability supports rational thinking. Rational thinking supports wise action. It may seem like a small personal choice to go for a walk instead of scrolling through distressing updates for hours, but multiplied across millions, it changes the psychological climate of a society. Financial discipline also plays a powerful role. War shadows often bring economic uncertainty. Markets fluctuate. Prices rise. Jobs feel less secure. Those without financial discipline feel immediate panic. Those who have practiced saving, investing carefully, and living within their means feel pressure, but not collapse. Their stability allows them to support others. It allows them to continue contributing productively. A financially disciplined population reduces the shock waves of instability. It strengthens the national foundation during global strain. But perhaps the most profound aspect of personal discipline in the shadow of war is moral clarity. In times of tension, it is easy to justify extreme positions. It is easy to see the world in black and white. It is easy to forget the shared humanity that exists beyond political disagreements. Discipline calls for nuance. It calls for empathy without naivety. It calls for strength without cruelty. It calls for loyalty without hatred. The disciplined individual holds complexity without collapsing into division. They understand that protecting one's country and respecting human life are not mutually exclusive values. This moral balance influences culture. Culture influences leadership. Leadership influences global outcomes. Courage is often misunderstood as loud or aggressive, but in times of potential conflict, courage often looks like restraint. It looks like choosing patience when provoked. It looks like seeking understanding before judgment. It looks like standing firm in values without escalating unnecessary hostility. Personal discipline fuels this kind of courage. Without discipline, courage becomes recklessness. With discipline, courage becomes wisdom in action. There is also a generational dimension. Children watch how adults respond during global crises. They observe conversations. They absorb attitudes. They internalize fear or resilience. A disciplined adult models calm under pressure. They explain complex issues without spreading panic. They show that challenges can be faced with preparation and unity rather than hysteria. those children grow into adults who handle future crises with steadiness. In that way, discipline today shapes the global destiny of tomorrow in a very literal sense. The shadow of war reminds us that peace is fragile. It requires maintenance. It requires vigilance. It requires maturity. And maturity begins at the individual level. You cannot demand wise leadership if you do not practice wisdom personally. You cannot ask for unity while fueling division in your own conversations. You cannot expect stability while living chaotically. Global destiny reflects collective character. Collective character reflects individual discipline. When fear rises, markets tremble, alliances shift, and uncertainty spreads, there is a temptation to focus solely on what is happening externally. But the deeper work is internal. The question is not only what nations will do next. The question is who we choose to become in response. Will we become reactive or reflective, divided or disciplined, panicked or prepared? These choices may seem personal, but they ripple outward in powerful ways. History shows that societies with strong internal character endure storms better than those without it. They adapt, they negotiate, they rebuild, they learn. But societies weakened by internal chaos struggle even in minor challenges. Discipline strengthens the internal foundation so that external pressures do not immediately cause collapse. So in the shadow of war, the most important training ground is not a battlefield. It is the daily routine. It is the alarm clock in the morning. It is the decision to read thoughtfully rather than consume outrage. It is the commitment to improve skills rather than complain about circumstances. It is the choice to treat neighbors with respect despite political differences. It is the effort to strengthen family bonds. It is the willingness to take responsibility instead of pointing fingers. These acts do not make headlines, but they shape culture, and culture shapes destiny. Global destiny is not written in a single dramatic moment. It is written gradually through habits. It is influenced by how disciplined people are when times are easy and especially when times are hard. The shadow of war may loom large, but it does not determine the future on its own. The future is determined by the quality of decisions made within that shadow. And here is the empowering truth. You may not control foreign policy. You may not influence military strategy, but you control your habits. You control your reactions. You control your preparation. You control your contribution to the tone of your community. That control is powerful. It is not small. It is not insignificant. It is foundational. When millions of individuals choose discipline over impulse, they are choosing to take control of their lives and make better choices. Preparation over panic, understanding over hostility, responsibility over blame, the shadow of war loses some of its power, because the real strength of any nation is not just its weapons or alliances. It is the character of its people. In the shadow of war, personal discipline is not merely a self-improvement strategy. It is a contribution to global stability. It is a quiet but powerful force shaping the direction of history. And when individuals commit to strengthening themselves daily, they become anchors in uncertain times. Anchors do not eliminate storms, but they prevent ships from drifting into destruction. That is how personal discipline shapes global destiny, not through dramatic declarations, but through steady, consistent character. Not through noise, but through resolve. Not through fear, but through courage, guided by wisdom. And in a world that sometimes feels on edge, that steady character may be the most powerful force of all. Personal discipline is where everything begins. It sounds simple when you say it out loud, but when you sit alone at night thinking about your life, your habits, your fears, and your responsibilities, you realize how powerful it truly is. Personal discipline is not about being perfect. It is not about being cold or robotic. It is about choosing what is right over what is easy again and again, especially when no one is watching. It is the quiet decision to wake up early when your body wants to stay in bed. It is the decision to control your words when anger is rising in your chest. It is the decision to turn off the noise of panic and think clearly when the world feels unstable. In times of global tension, when headlines speak of conflict and uncertainty, personal discipline becomes more than a self-improvement tool. It becomes emotional protection. Fear spreads quickly. One alarming message can change the mood of an entire day. But discipline allows you to pause. It allows you to breathe before reacting. It allows you to ask yourself, is this information true? Is my reaction helpful? What can I actually control? That pause is powerful. It separates maturity from impulsiveness. It protects your peace in a world that sometimes feels chaotic. Personal discipline is also about emotional strength. When you feel fear about the future, when you worry about your family's safety or financial stability, it is natural. You are human. But discipline teaches you not to live inside that fear. It teaches you to acknowledge it without surrendering to it. It reminds you that panic does not solve problems. Clear thinking does. So you discipline your thoughts. You refuse to replay worst-case scenarios over and over. You focus on preparation instead of paranoia. You strengthen your body. You build your skills. You save your money. You improve your communication. That is discipline in action. There is something deeply human about this struggle. Every person fights laziness. Every person fights distraction. Every person fights doubt. Personal discipline is not about eliminating those feelings. It is about acting correctly despite them. That is what builds character. And character is not built during comfort. It is built during tension. When the world feels uncertain, the disciplined individual becomes a stabilizing force in their family, in their workplace, in their community. People begin to look to them for calm, for clarity, for strength, not because they are loud, but because they are steady. Personal discipline also means protecting your mind. It means being careful about what you consume, especially during crises. Constant exposure to fear-driven content weakens your clarity. Discipline allows you to stay informed without becoming overwhelmed. It allows you to limit negativity without ignoring reality. That balance is powerful. It keeps you strong enough to support others. When you practice personal discipline daily, you build confidence. Not loud confidence, but quiet trust in yourself. You begin to believe that no matter what happens externally, you can adapt. You can learn. You can endure. That belief changes the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you plan. And when millions of individuals carry that quiet confidence, society becomes more stable. The world may face storms, but disciplined individuals become anchors. Personal discipline is not glamorous. It is repetitive. It is sometimes uncomfortable, but it is deeply empowering. It reminds you that even when global events feel beyond your control, your choices still matter, your habits still shape your future, and your steady character contributes to something far larger than you can see. Global responsibility begins with a simple realization. We are more connected than we often admit. What happens in one region can affect markets in another. A decision made by leaders thousands of miles away can influence the cost of food on your table. The world is no longer isolated islands. It is a shared system. And because of that, responsibility cannot stop at borders. It must expand into awareness, empathy, and thoughtful action. Global responsibility does not mean you must solve international conflicts by yourself. It means you understand that your words, your actions, and your attitudes contribute to the emotional climate of the world. When conflict rises between nations, emotions run high. People become defensive. Divisions grow. In those moments, global responsibility starts with refusing to dehumanize others. It starts with recognizing that ordinary families in every country want the same basic things: safety, dignity, opportunity, peace. There is something deeply emotional about this awareness. When you imagine parents in another country worrying about their children just like you worry about yours, it softens anger. It does not remove political disagreement. It does not eliminate the need for national security, but it reminds you that humanity exists on all sides. That reminder influences your tone. It influences your conversations. It influences the energy you spread in your community. Global responsibility also means educating yourself. It means resisting the urge to accept simplified narratives that fuel hatred. It means seeking balanced understanding. That takes effort. It takes discipline, but it protects you from manipulation. A population that thinks critically cannot be easily pushed toward unnecessary hostility. Thoughtful citizens raise the standard of dialogue. Higher dialogue influences leadership. Leadership shapes global decisions. There is also economic responsibility. In an interconnected world, instability anywhere can create ripple effects everywhere. Practicing financial discipline, supporting ethical businesses, and contributing productively to your local economy strengthens the broader system. When individuals act responsibly, the economic foundation becomes stronger. Strong economies are less vulnerable to collapse during global tension. Global responsibility carries emotional weight because it asks you to think beyond yourself. It asks you to care about consequences you may never personally experience. It asks you to choose words carefully because they influence others. It asks you to model calm because anxiety spreads. This kind of responsibility is mature. It is not dramatic. It is steady and intentional. When people embrace global responsibility, they become bridge builders instead of wall builders. They promote understanding without surrendering principles. They stand for peace without ignoring reality. They influence their children to see the world with depth rather than prejudice. And over time, this mindset shifts culture. Culture influences policy. Policy shapes global destiny. Global responsibility is heavy, but it is also empowering. It reminds you that you are not just a spectator in history. You are a participant. Your voice matters. Your character matters. Your choices matter. And when enough people choose responsibility over reaction, the world becomes more stable. Resilient leadership is not about power. It is about stability under pressure. When conflict looms or uncertainty spreads, leadership is tested in its purest form. Anyone can lead when conditions are calm. But true leadership is revealed when tension rises, when fear spreads, when difficult decisions must be made. Resilient leadership begins internally. Before someone can guide others, they must guide themselves. They must manage their emotions. They must stay steady when others are shaken. This is not easy. When global tensions escalate, even leaders feel fear. They worry about consequences. They feel the weight of responsibility. But resilience allows them to absorb pressure without collapsing. There is something deeply human about resilient leadership. It does not pretend everything is fine. It acknowledges difficulty. It speaks honestly about challenges, but it also communicates hope grounded in action. It says, yes, this is serious. Yes, this requires strength, and we will face it together. That tone matters. It calms panic. It builds trust. Resilient leaders also listen. In times of crisis, people want to be heard. They want their fears acknowledged. Leadership that dismisses emotion creates distance. Leadership that recognizes emotion builds connection. That connection strengthens unity. And unity is powerful during instability. Resilient leadership requires long-term vision. When conflict threatens to escalate, impulsive decisions can cause irreversible damage. A resilient leader pauses. They evaluate consequences. They weigh short-term reactions against long-term impact. That patience protects nations. It prevents emotional escalation. On a personal level, you do not need a political title to practice resilient leadership. You lead in your family. You lead in your workplace. You lead in your community. When you remain calm during stress, others follow your example. When you speak thoughtfully instead of angrily, you shift the tone of conversation. When you prepare instead of panic, you inspire confidence. Resilient leadership is deeply emotional because it requires courage. It requires standing firm when opinions are divided. It requires choosing wisdom over applause. It requires prioritizing stability over ego. And when practiced widely, resilient leadership shapes the destiny of nations. In the shadow of war, resilient leaders become pillars. They do not eliminate storms, but they prevent collapse. They guide with clarity. They protect with wisdom. They inspire with courage. And through their steadiness, they remind everyone that even in uncertain times, strength rooted in character can light the way forward.